There are places of longing to which one returns again and again because they are beautiful and exotic, or the exact opposite. Perhaps they have become home in their striking first otherness. The heavy door to Chez Josephine in New York's theatre district conceals one of the last places of its kind in the metropolis, the bohemian New York, the New York of Jean-Claude Baker. Come on in, mein Schatz. I have a nice table for you. Baker speaks German with passion and a heavy French accent. Jean-Claude carries a grand name, the first black female artist of world fame. Josephine Baker evolves in 1957 into the mother and confidant he never had before, independent, outspoken, successful, and mostly absent. The best time of my life he spent in Berlin, West Berlin, he explains, as it was called back in 1963 when he arrived at the famous Fassenstrasse in Charlottenburg, Wilmersdorf. 20 years old, Jean-Claude hitchhiked all the way from France, already having lived two lives. First was the one of a poor semi-orphan who didn't know his father and was ridiculed by the villagers because his mother was sometimes begging for money. Then, the beautiful adolescent starting a new life at age 14 in Paris, where he was raped by an older man. Then the beautiful adolescent starting a new life at age 14 in Paris, where he was raped by an older man. My little brothel, Baker lovingly calls his restaurant, was once an erotic massage parlour, with its opulent reds, the warm muted light, the soft piano music, the large-scale paintings that mostly show a scantily clad Josephine Baker, and the large mirrors on the walls. A certain sensuality can be felt at Chez Josephine. That sensuality continues on the menu, from delicate filet mignon that you should consume most bloody with a glass of Cabernet Franc, to the frozen cappuccino parfait. All of Baker's creations melt in one's mouth. In 1986, Baker opened his restaurant in New York City's theatre district, notorious for its red light industry. I loved it here back then. Prostitutes, people in the streets looking for sex. It was so lively. I miss that because it had soul, and people like me need that to survive. Times change, but we're still here. I am an entertainer. I love the show, he says with a smile. Rises, hovers to the door in his black silk soutane in order to greet the next guest with open arms. Baker enjoys telling stories of West Berlin and how well he was treated in a divided post-war Germany. In Germany, you have shown me so much respect and tolerance as I have honestly hardly experienced anywhere else, says Baker, always keeping an eye on his service staff. Strict but fair and incredibly generous, bartender Robert McDaniel describes his boss, and he should know he's been working for the past 25 years for the now 69-year-old Baker. Jean-Claude works hard and he expects the same from us. In the 25 years he has fired me 3 times, and I was suspended about 10 times. He smirks while mixing a gin and tonic. Jean-Claude Baker arrived 2 years after the construction of the Berlin Wall and was able to quickly gain a foothold in the local film, arts and alternative club scene. The handsome eccentric with impeccable manners and charming directness enchanted Berlin's high society. The key figure and protege during the Berlin years was Norbert Binder, owner of the gay bar Kleist Casino. Jean-Claude became his personal disc jockey, and not too long after his arrival he was able to open his own bar, the Pimm's Club, for bisexuals, gays, lesbians and heterosexuals alike. The club was my cocktail of human beings. The Pimm's Club was quickly becoming one of West Berlin's exclusive addresses. Leonard Bernstein, Romy Schneider. There's Romy Schneider again. Orson Welles, Zara Leander. They all visited and enjoyed the ambience. It was a place where they could be whoever they wanted. In the 1950s, he'd made the acquaintance of Josephine Baker in Paris, a relationship that deepened significantly in Berlin. I'd heard that Josephine was in town and she had problems, so I decided to arrange a concert in her honor. Because Baker predicted that Josephine might not be able to fill concert halls by herself, he hired the German stars, the Keisler twins. Josephine was weak, fairly done up, and wore a wig, but on stage she was still a star. Baker decided to take the life of the aging star in his hands and organize fundraisers for the 12 adopted children. Josephine called her Rainbow Tribe. Josephine's utopian dream of eternal solidarity. Baker calls it in retrospect with admiration in his voice. During the next 10 years, until Josephine's death in Paris, in 1975, Baker operated as manager, secretary, breadwinner, confidant, and son of the sometimes moody Josephine. Together they traveled to Europe and the United States. In daytime she was pretty unbearable, but in the evenings when we were alone it was different, says Baker. In her honor he founded the Jean-Claude Baker Foundation, which is dedicated in particular for the promotion of African American artists.
Reinventing her image with the changing times, using her celebrity status to promote humanitarian causes, or adopting children from foreign countries, Baker was a cultural trailblazer.
Jean-Claude gave me an autographed copy of his book, The Hungry Heart, but, you know, when I was living in New York, I never read. And after I got back home, well, the book was stolen. I don't know where it went. It's gone. Like all the other precious things that I've been given. Mind control is a manipulation of attachment needs. And that's why in the end, you just gotta kiss those things goodbye. But in Jean-Claude's story, I can see the recipe for the international sex slave. Take one orphan who's been impoverished, humiliated, and ostracized in childhood. Give him a beautiful face and then send him into the world. I decided to go to England because I needed to speak English. Madame Rook, the wife of the restaurant's owner, agreed to take a British boy in exchange for Jean-Claude's presence in the UK. Sponsorship was necessary at the time. Women have been very good to me. Jean-Claude ended up in Liverpool where he became friends with Peter Brown and Brian Epstein. Brown later went on to public relation work. Epstein became manager of the Beatles. Twice a week he'd leave his job at the Adelphi Hotel above and go to the Cavern to dance. I was a fabulous dancer. A fledgling group called the Beatles were performing. Dreadful haircuts, like mushrooms. A year later, required to fulfill his military service, he returned to France. With 3 months to kill, cousin Nadette suggested Jean-Claude accompany her to West Germany, where she was studying the language. He got a job as a busboy at La Maison de France, a stylish restaurant owned by the French government on the Kurfürstendamm, the Champs-Élysées of West Berlin. The Champs-Élysées of West Berlin. An in-your-face capitalist insult to a communist empire. On Palm Sunday, Jean-Claude collapsed in the street and awoke in hospital. The surgeons had botched an appendix operation. Turning yellow, he was transferred at night to another facility, where he was patently expected to die. Jean-Claude describes an out-of-body experience as matter-of-factly as if he'd had a change of bandages. He does not, he pointedly informs me, believe in God. They saved his life. 6 months later, when released, he found the French government had been paying his salary all along. I was rich. Second and third induction notices were met with such impassioned and extreme excuses. He was forgiven service, ultimately staying 11 years in West Berlin. La Maison de France. The most famous disco in the city, Maccatal, had been shut down by police because of scandal. Jean-Claude emptied his bank account, charmed his way onto a new lease, and opened Pim's Club, my cocktail of human beings. When the gays came and said there was too much pussy, I'd say, you know what, go boil yourself in a gay bar. When the straight people said there were too many faggots, I'd say, go boil yourself in a straight bar. I created a theatre. By that time, Jean-Claude was comfortably AC/DC. I could tango or I could waltz. See The Ultimate Sex Slave. You can tango or waltz, right? There would be no discrimination in his establishment. It became the place to see and be seen. Rudolf Nureyev, my best friend, and Margot Fontaine, Errol Garner, Leonard Bernstein, Jesse Norman, Orson Welles, all frequented. Pim's Club served microwaved hamburgers and caviar. Food was not the point. Give him access to money and power and the turntable. And then encourage him to create the dream that will draw all of the other souls in, all of the other hungry hearts that are looking for home, love, friendship, connection. Who are on the quest for a happy ending. Who are running away from the gang stalkers in their own town, the bullying they grew up in, the little box that life put them in and said, stay there, don't move. In the story of Jean-Claude Baker and Josephine Baker, the trauma and humiliation that they suffered has a happy ending. And that happy ending is mobility and money and the ability to make all your dreams happen. Even if your dreams at the end of the ride all turn out to be delusions. And Josephine Baker's Rainbow Tribe was a delusion. You know, she wanted an international, you know, solidarity amongst people. It was, so she just picked out these kids like she was picking out puppies, and then put them all together and told them what they were. But she'd made it up. It was all just a delusion in her head. It wasn't easy being a member of the Rainbow Tribe. My fake Jewish brother died 2 years ago, Mr. Baker said, explaining that Ms. Baker, lacking an Israeli member of the tribe, plucked a 14-month-old kid from a foster home outside of Paris, put a yarmulke on him and called him Moshe. "It's criminal," he shouted. "And my poor brother, the fake Moses, when he finds out, what's this shit? I'm not one of the Jewish people, I'm Catholic and I'm from Brittany." It traumatized him. He died 2 years later from cancer. He was a bum living on the street. He had to be a fake Jew all his life. I'm tired of Josephine. It's time I came out. Thank you. Let me speak now. How interesting. So it was all a fake dream, you know? The Rainbow Tribe, the, you know, eternal solidarity. It was all a dream, a lie, a simulacra. It wasn't easy being a member of the Rainbow Tribe. Classic. So she didn't really give those orphans a home. She gave them a house of cards. And a house of cards won't protect you.
For the funeral of Josephine Baker. Until then, perhaps no one had quite understood the depth of love and admiration in which she was held throughout her adopted country. For in spite of the 21-gun salute, in spite of being the very proud holder of the Legion of Honor and the Medal of the Resistance, Josephine Baker was not French. Her roots lay in the very heart of Black America. In the summer of 19... Just as New Yorkers began to take Josephine to their hearts, she was gone. In the late summer of 1925, Josephine woke up to find herself in Paris. Caroline Dudley, a rich American wife of a diplomat, decided to bring over a group of musicians. She wanted to show the French what the Jazz Age was all about. In deciding to join the cast of La Revue Nègre, Josephine made the biggest decision of her life.
I think that at that period, Paris was really, artistically speaking, the center of the world. It began like a storm. It was like a storm also because the economics were good. It was the boom that would stop in 1930 after the big crack in war.
And when I look at Jean-Claude's history and the crossover between the French government, the military, and the elites. He was a presidential model himself from the get-go. But he was also the Pied Piper. In 1976, ever-resilient Jean-Claude established Télé-France USA, starting on Manhattan Cable Channel 10 twice a week with 2 potpourri hours of French life, cooking, fashion, visits to chateaux and interviews with visiting French celebrities. The service would grow and thrive despite initial lack of vision and cooperation from his countrymen. Television in Europe was still a state monopoly. French government representatives here were uninterested. Not until Jean-Claude cornered Raymond Barre, then Prime Minister of France, at the French Embassy in Washington, would a door open from that sector. The very afternoon, Monsieur Barre made his supportive feelings known. $75,000 in advertising contracts were secured on the sidewalk. What happened behind closed doors there? Télé-France USA won 2 ACE Awards, an acronym for Award for Cable Excellence. Jean-Claude sold 51% interest to the French government 7 years later and looked for a new challenge. He briefly affiliated himself with restaurants and then decided to open his own. And from the Pim's Club, he knew how to lead the punters into his pansexual paradise. You know, that was the 60s, and now we have Miley Cyrus. It's really the same demonic agenda. It's the underworld that is now being mainstreamed. And the reason why it can be mainstreamed is because what that delusion requires is a total denial of God. If you admit God exists, then the dream falls apart. Because to admit to a God is to commit to the truth. And how can you commit to the truth? In a system built on lies. That system will tear you apart the minute you try. I did try. I had a long and quite complex program that I was put through. Officially starting in 1984 in that Alex Proyas film clip. That was my public debut as a target as a chosen one, as an enemy of Freemasonry. And when I look at where Jean-Claude has been, I see the crossover between the government and the corporate sector, and the crossover between the government and the elites. You know, it's like Jackie O coming for dinner. She always sat up the end of the bar near the garbage bins so she could be alone. She didn't like people. She ate a little fish. It's funny because Jean-Claude told me that I had Jackie O bone structure. And a few years later, Hawkins, another homo hubby, when he was doing the deal with Manelli, sent me a Warhol bag from New York with Jackie O on the bag, and I took that bag around Australia. And there are other connections too, but they involve members of my family, so I'm not going to go there. But, you know, it's not that I cross paths with any of these people in the real world, but in a weird metaphysical way, they would turn up over and over, like Jackie O. You know, they turn up like one of those, you know, Cupid dolls. Summer of the 17th doll sort of ways, you know, like heads on sticks, moving across my landscape.
Because it's not true. God calls his children, and his children oftentimes are the outcasts, or the people that don't quite fit in, and you know, these are the ones who the Lord gathers, however he does it. These are the ones the Lord gathers. Satan, and who I believe is a real being called Lucifer, who is a real being. It's just that, you know, there's the spirit of the satanic spirit, but there's also the objective real, in my opinion. Other people may disagree with that, so, you know, and I respectfully disagree. I've seen the devil. I know that there's a devil that's not a projection of my imagination. But that's fine, you know. We have to deal with the thing that's inside us. Anyway, the devil recruits and gathers his own. Satan recruits those of that same like spirit.
So it was like when you crossed over into Chez Josephine and the world of the dream of Josephine Baker, the dream of, you know, international solidarity of, you know, of man, and like all these things that can't really actually be achieved without the presence of God. Like, forget it. You take God out and give people a big decision to make, and they will end up killing themselves and each other. So Jean-Claude Baker's sort of, the dream that he created was at the nexus of the triangle. And it illustrated that, you know, so perfectly, so beautifully, so poetically. His story illustrates the relationship between the shadow government, which is indeed the slave trade. And of course they want gay marriage now, you know, the fat controllers. Because they've got a well-established slave network within the gays already, very old one. And in this way, Jean-Claude Baker, he represents where those worlds cross over. You know, the politicians and the wives of presidents and the great filmmakers and composers. They would sit at his bar, they would eat at his table. And he was allowed, and he was given many opportunities. You can see from his bio, from the get-go, he was given many opportunities to really take his dream and run with it. And he did. And you know, I love him. The colourful owner of French celebrity haunt, Chez Josephine in Hell's Kitchen, committed suicide after struggling for years with depression, close friends confirmed to the Post. The body of Jean-Claude Baker, 71, was discovered Thursday morning by police inside his Mercedes-Benz at his East Hampton home, though it's unclear exactly when he died. Friends of the beloved restaurateur who opened the West 42nd Street eatery as a tribute to his adoptive mother, jazz performer Josephine Baker, said he was battling severe depression despite his larger-than-life personality.